the news and world events, especially those regarding conflict and energy, we want to keep in mind a framework for understanding and explaining why we're behaving in these ways under the conditions. And this helps us understand what comes next as well as how we can adapt. So, in order to kind of summarize this framework, I relied heavily on this quote and summarization by George Orwell from his book 1984. The war is not meant to be won, it is meant to be continuous. The essential act of modern warfare is the destruction of the produce of human labor. A hierarchical society is only possible on the basis of poverty and ignorance. In principle, the war effort is always planned to keep society on the brink of starvation. The war is waged by the ruling group against its own subjects, that's you, and its object is not victory, but to keep the very structure of society intact. Okay, I paraphrase, put in a little of my own words there, but I highlight hierarchical society. Will return to this because this is a dominance hierarchy that's built upon violence and extraction of resources. This is what human civilizations have done as they moved from hunter gatherers into the city state paradigm, then into the nation state paradigm, which was formed in about 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia. And now we've moved into the market state paradigm, in which the forces of the state, that means the militaries, uh, executive branches, they're all working hand in hand and mostly for market forces. That means technocrats or the elite, the richest and wealthiest developers of technologies in the world. And energy uh, corporations are one of those. And now think groups like Palantir and other electronic surveillance uh, groups are taking control very quickly so that as energy decline kicks in, they'll still be able to continue this framework, this war against the people or the lower rungs of the hierarchy. The people in power, the people that design most of our stuff and control our policy, are not interested in helping you. They're not interested in providing a stable Earth system or a future for our planet. They're interested in making as much money, wealth, and power, and now social control as possible. And in their meantime, their spare time, they tend to you know go to Epstein Island and rape little kids. So if that's the kind of society you want, then yeah, you're on your own path. But if you want to understand how we got here, as well as how to extract yourself and your family and your friends more and more from this paradigm, as well as understand just generally what's likely to happen next, this is a really good framework to start with. In other words, there's not going to be an end to any of these wars anytime soon. Uh, we're going back and forth between Trump is on and off with attacking Iran, and the Hormuz Strait has been closed again. Record low shipments through the strait and record high oil prices are coming up, as well as locked into the system are massive disruptions in supply chains. We'll talk about those a little bit more later. Again, US foreign policy has been and continues to favor market state profiteering at enormous cost to human lives as well as nature. This was written into our policy planning papers. If you take a look at George Kennan's policy planning paper number 23. This was written after World War II, about 1948, and it laid out uh, these plans. So it doesn't matter, Democrat or Republican, who you elect. Quit pretending. Please quit pretending. That makes a difference. Um, the U.S. policy is to control energy resources with violence and feed this sort of war state. The Technate of the Americas is another policy plan, which was just coincidentally developed in conjunction with Elon Musk's grandfather. And it's the idea that we could use technology to control a region between Greenland and about Venezuela, Colombia, Panama Canal. Maybe this would start making this new administration's ideas about these sudden crazy ideas about controlling Greenland and taking over Greenland, as well as the invasion of Venezuela and capture of Maduro, its president. Oh, does this make more sense now? Yes, it does. So start with a real framework and quit lying to yourselves that you can vote your way out of this system. It's been doing this since we won World War II, or since we didn't win. The U.S. forces within the U.S. had all the power in the world after World War II, or most of it, I should say, and they set about these plans that have been in action for quite a long time, and they write the papers, and that's what they're basing their actions on. So check out the papers that they write, and then you'll understand the world a little bit better. Modern societies will generally exploit the highest available energy returned on energy extracted energy sources first. These provide the most energy for the least amount of effort. We took all the easy to get oil. That's gone. The light crude, the quickly profitable stuff is gone. So we're going to be, and the stuff, the crude oil and energy and mineral resources that are in areas that don't have human communities that fight back, that stuff's gone. So now there's just going to be war, which uses a lot of resources, has a horrible toll for society, and enormous environmental efforts. We're going to be continue to use war until decentralized action and communities can take over in one way or another. And a couple brief quotes. These are direct quotes from policy planning paper number 23, again written in 1948. George Kennan says, "We have about 50% of the world's wealth, but only about 6.3% of its population." He's referring to the US at the end of World War II. "Our real task in the coming period is to devise a pattern of relationships which will permit us to maintain this position of disparity without positive detriment to our national security. To do so, we will have to dispense with all sentimentality and daydreaming, and our attention will have to be concentrated everywhere on our immediate national objectives. We need not deceive ourselves that we can afford today the luxury of altruism and world benefaction." This should be really obvious that this was written into our policy, and it's been the basis for an enormous amount of the decisions that our country or the United States has made throughout the world. Again, during this time, we were also hiring the Nazis that were going through the Nuremberg trials. So, a lot of our culture in the US, this is the trauma based mind control, this is the media, this explains a lot of what's happened with your R. Kelly's, your P. Diddy's, your Epstein Island, and all the media that's generated by this culture. It comes from a lot of it's influenced and initiated through these programs, which introduced the ideas and occult practices of many of the Nazis, which were hired and taken under protection into the United States following World War II instead of tried and executed as they probably should have been. The Technate of the Americas is again another policy planning paper. It was actually drawn up in the 1930s, and the members of this technocracy movement sought to replace market based economies and political governance with a system where experts made decisions based on data, efficiency, and technological feasibility. Technocrats believed that the mechanisms and automation would eliminate much of the need for human labor, reducing work hours while maintaining productivity. Does this sound familiar? Okay, look at what's happening with AI. They will drain every bit of water from your neighborhood, from your community, from your state, from your area, take all the power, overcharge you for power and energy to fuel an AI data center, and they'll use that against you with flock cameras to control your behavior to keep this system going. Only about 75 of the 4,000 plus data centers in the US have been stopped by organized community action, protests, and community pressure. So the US is in for a lot more social manipulation and control. You can escape this on your own if you understand more and more of how it works. Okay, so this is, I believe, New Mexico Representative Teresa Fernandez just a couple days ago posted in response to Trump flipping the war, quote unquote, war back on, the never ending war, part of another sequence of unending wars that the US has constantly engaged in. So here's her response. Trump said the war with Iran was over. He lied. Now he's telling Congress and the United States is at war again and claiming another 60 days to wage it without congressional approval. So it's set up in our laws that you can use the military forces of the state to engage in war without congressional approval for 60 days. And when the 60 days were up just recently, Trump stopped the war and then renamed it a different war. It called it it's a new war. So it's not the same one. So legally, I have power to go on and bomb war. Again, the system is set up for endless war. We're not going to vote our way out of it. Look what happened with Thomas Massey recently. Occasionally, there's people who stand up and attempt to say, hey, this system is corrupt and you're all need to be investigated for your participation and collusion with Epstein networks, as well as intelligence networks that rely on horrific blackmail schemes. And when you do that, you get pulled away and out of the system. So we're going to need a lot more social pressure and movements to address those issues. That might not happen anytime soon, but it needs to. Because this is, again, this long process of endless wars to feed the market state. The US spent about 3 years in Korea, 9 years in Iraq, in large amounts, they're permanently there, 20 years in Vietnam, and 20 more in Afghanistan, aside from innumerable covert and overt military actions since World War II. The US has thousands of bases around the world and is a military society. Again, it's not just the government profiting, the corporations, Lockheed Martin, Marietta, Raytheon, they're happy. They're loving this. They're making a ton of money. Their employees are making a lot of money, and their future's looking great and bright because as long as these wars keep going on, they're going to need increasing types of technology to control human behavior within the society, as well as extract resources instead of inventing applicable alternatives to energy decline. Looking briefly at energy decline, this is an image of the billion barrels of oil equivalent broken down into specific types of fossil fuel as well as alternative energy resources. Again, crude oil is peaking. You can see where we're at 2026, right around the peak of global oil production. Again, if you don't believe this, maybe you looked at some other data, you really have to check and see both at your gas station as well as the what metrics they're using, because a lot of times they hide peak oil by including things like ethanol into your data, like oh, we've got plenty of energy, we've got uh, shale gas spiked up the overall energy. Well, that's not crude oil. Hubbard's predictions still stand. Marion King Hubbard, the Shell geophysicist, was right. Oil peaked in the 70s nationally in production of the US, and then we weren't really prepared for the oil crisis. We adapted to it with laws and manipulation of foreign oil in the mid to late 70s, and now we're facing global energy shortages, and we're quickly barreling into a new world regime of energy production and control based on the fact that the easy to get stuff, the easy to get fossil fuel energy resources are over, and the rest of them are in places where people are fighting desperately to control them. Um, Growth-based economics are coming to an end. Of course, there's still going to be efforts to make society more complex, but most of those are going to rely on extremely destructive resources. Complexity can also be built in your own social groups and social networks to live a better lifestyle and avoid participating in this insane process of destruction of the planet for non-renewable resources that are extremely destructive to human populations as well as the environment. There are plenty of decentralized energy solutions. Don't expect them to be introduced from corporations or your government. Sorry, start thinking for yourself and networking. So right now, as we see Trump bombing the heck out of Iran and the area in the Middle East erupting into conflict again, commercial transits through the Strait of Hormuz have collapsed to near zero. March 13th was the 5 week low due to increased bombing for transits through the Strait of Hormuz. You can see the pre war average was about 75. And then in March, 5, 2, 1, there was a huge drop. And then it started coming back up again. And it felt like, oh, the fuel prices are kind of down a little bit. It's going to be okay. We can ignore all this stuff. Whoops, Trump and the United States are back bombing the hell out of the Middle East, and oil prices are about to spike again. And the strategic petroleum reserves have been brought down to a record low. So, the social and environmental impacts of non renewable energy extraction and use demand legitimately sustainable alternatives. That means non growth based production of resources. War and conflict in critical fuel producing regions has exploded right now, already causing long term damage to oil infrastructure. That's the other thing is this isn't going to be resolved anytime soon because refineries have been blown up. Uh, Entire corporations and companies, their strategy, insurance companies don't want to insure boats in the Strait of Hormuz. Not now, not anytime soon. The entire economic system and infrastructure of oil in the Middle East, as well as many other supplies, has gone into a massive, rapid uh, decline. That's a euphemism. Again, this is more than just oil. It's a lot of it's a lot of other resources. So, also, war is not a strategy that only the collapsing U.S. empire has embraced. Again, Russia and Ukraine conflict has actually now just recently gone longer than World War One, and we obviously don't know when this is going to end. This has interrupted an enormous amount of supply chains, especially in major food exports, wheat, fertilizer, potassium, potash, natural gas. Again, a lot of crude oil in those regions has been interrupted, as well as many resources to produce everything industrial, as and this includes high tech uh, chip processing, neon gas, as well as helium gas have been interrupted. So thinking that, oh, we'll just get some electric cars and get our way out of this. All of the things needed to make all of the machines are declining in availability. Prices will skyrocket. There'll still be some there, but these changes are irreversible on any decent time frame. And even if war stopped in these areas immediately, the amount of restoration of the communities and infrastructure the investments in this are not going to be coming through anytime soon. So you can expect a lot of price increases as well as supply shortages coming through because it's not just one war. There's war all over the planet um, for these last resources. The Strait of Hormuz supply chain disruptions, like the Ukraine and Russia conflict disruptions, are not limited to just crude oil. Naphtha is involved as a chemical industrial product involved in the creation of plastics, paints, and as well as all types of automotive manufacturing. Shortages in naphtha will be resulting due to the conflict in the Strait of Hormuz, so you'll get decreases in those industries. Jet fuel shortages have already caused massive decreases in travel, tourism. You've had different countries putting fuel lockdowns and fuel restrictions, as well as digital requirements for purchasing fuel, like in Mexico and I believe the Philippines and Indonesia. So you're already seeing this electronic grid control introduced immediately under emergency conditions. The emergencies brought on by this system and the people introducing the other systems are the same people that are following this paradigm of extraction, social control for the people at the bottom of the hierarchy who still need some resources to keep working in the industrial economy. It's not working out. Lubrication and grease shortages affect all mechanical industries. Anything using a machine, more or less, is going to rely on some sort of lubrication and grease. These are all being interrupted. We'll see these in 6 months to a year. The effects of these shortages more. Some people already notice these as price increases in just motor oil and other lubricants. Shortages of sulfur and helium gas are also uh, a factor that has been forced by the current Strait of Hormuz closure. This will lead to a decline in electronic chip manufacturing. And in general, virtually all mineral mining relies on sulfuric acid, and sulfur shortages are contributing to changes and declines in sulfuric acid production. So you're going to get a lot of decline in all these different industries that we're supposed to build this bright green high tech future that won't really be happening anytime soon unless you take it on up on your own to figure out ways to adapt in your region and produce your own energy, move off the grid, and network with other groups to do the same thing. Everyone else will be relying on resources that are in limited supply and fighting over them. Strategic petroleum reserves are stockpiles of crude oil. So these have been drawn down to a record low um, as of right now in July 2026. This is only updated to 2025. Biden pulled out a large amount of U.S. strategic petroleum reserves too, but we're even below that record lows. That's crude oil, so it still has to be refined. So it's not like something, a quick fix to energy spike. Right now, there's so much destabilization in the fossil fuel economy that maybe a hurricane or two wipes out a major refinery, a critical node in the system, and you're going to have huge prices, energy spikes all over. It's very sensitive to disruptions, even though it feels like maybe day to day, the price of gas went down a few cents and things are going to be okay, and people are going back to work and everything's normal. Yeah, you're really on the brink of a major shift. Don't know exactly if it's going to happen or not, but the sensitivity to shocks or interruptions in supply chains is enormous right now. And a big part of that is because the drawdowns in the strategic petroleum reserves. Keep in mind, adaptations are pretty simple, and they're things that if you haven't been doing any of these already, you might want to start considering them. Start preparing for shortages appropriate to your needs and region. Consider what vehicle you use, what parts it might need, and alternative vehicles, ride sharing, getting out on a bicycle all the freaking time, as Bodies by Phil, which is somewhere in Canada, I believe, has posted on their sign. The recommendation is get strong AF before society collapses. And so, what do we mean by society collapsing? Not that big of a deal. It's not the end of the world. It's just a massive transition that we're already in. It's got a lot of different euphemisms. Uh, the Great Simplification, the collapse of industrial civilization. Different people call this different things, but overshoot, ecological overshoot, and collapse in the human population. All of these have begun and will continue because of that framework of growth based economics based on violent extraction of fossil fuels, feeding a system that just wants more and more power concentrated and centralized at the top of the hierarchy. Historical analogs, and I quote unquote analog because there's no true analog to the situation. There's not a historical situation quite like what we're in. So some of the closest things that I would point out would be the 2008 subprime collapse. How is this an analog? Well, it's because most of society was thinking everything's fine. I could buy. I should say most of society in the U.S. was picking up these horrible subprime mortgages and thinking they could buy multiple houses. The economy is always going to grow for us. And then suddenly that fell through, and the bank took your house. And there were only a few people that were screaming, hey, this system is not going to work. It is set for collapse. And those people were people like Michael Burry, and they were demonized and castigated, but say, "Oh, you're crazy! You're a doomsayer! We're not going to listen to you." And of course, they were right. So, in many cases, the world can be completely and utterly wrong. Mass society is under mass psychosis, and then the outliers, those people that are uh, experts, the autists, the schizos, the weirdos, who look through this system and are able to predict and understand more about how it works, those people are generally going to be pushed away because what they're saying requires society to change. On an individual basis, no one wants to hear that. We want to hear, I'll get a bigger house and I'll get a bigger truck and we'll get more cheap fossil fuels. And people are going to have to really start to learn that this does not work, because COVID lockdowns is another similar analog. There are already plans to lock down society based on a lot of other emergencies. And really, these are just things that are locked into the Earth system, like massive climate change. So, another the other analog here is you're going to get, because society hasn't paid attention to our system and been able to shift it. Expect in a lot of places to be likely shut inside your house again because of environmental issues or energy issues or conflicts. Doesn't matter where you live, too much. There's plenty of places and communities that can support new economies, but a lot of your cities are just gonna continue to barrel into collapse. And if you don't build your own networks with established groups that are viably building alternatives, you're going to be subjected to the laws of the system, which needs to continue taking more from the planet than it gives back. So, deprogramming yourself from mass media brainwashing and trauma based mind control is also a subject I'll explore later on, because I'm actually going to jump on my bike and go ride around and visit friends and talk about environmental projects in our local region. But before I do that, I'd like to point out again, hierarchical organization in either dominance or prestige hierarchies is the go-to method for human social primates, and it's not completely evil. There's definitely instances where prestige hierarchies are useful for accomplishing many different goals. Obviously, dominance hierarchies have been useful for achieving a lot of awful goals because dominance hierarchies are violent and centralize power at the top of the hierarchy at the expense of the lower rungs. On a materially limited planet, the nature is also considered at the bottom of all of our societies. It's not important. Nature, natural resources, living systems, all of the ecosystem services provided by clean river, by forest, these don't them these don't on their own get accounted for in the dominance hierarchies. So this is only possible on the basis of poverty and ignorance. So the two go hand in hand. Education, self education can help solve this as well as emancipate yourself from the system and its consequences. So, building social networks and building resilient culture through your own groups involves communicating with established permaculture initiatives, food and energy production at a local scale, decentralized education, and things like emergency first response training. These should be integrated into uh, education and universities um, because we're moving in more and more into the abrupt climate change. You can see this happening all over Europe. India, over 3,400 people have died just by heat. France is having mass deaths and 45, 46 degrees centigrade temperature. Just talked to a friend in Holland, in the Netherlands. It was about 40 Celsius there. These are record breaking temperatures that affect all of the production of food and will also ripple through the system to compound the problems caused by war, waste, and money lenders. All of these systems have to change, and we have to pull ourselves out of them as quickly and responsibly. And one of the things that we can do to have vocation paying jobs that allow you to travel is get that emergency first response training while you can. EMT is accepted all over the world in or internationally in most places, depending on who you get your EMT training from. And then now you can save people's lives and adjust to a lot of the disasters which are happening as a result of the excess of our present civilization. So, hopefully, this inspires you to start making a small difference and preparing in your own ways for the near future. When the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. Have a great day.